From the News Channel 5 Network, this is Morning Line with Nick Barris.
Good morning, everyone. Thanks for joining us on Morning Line, and Nick Barris here with you on this Tuesday. And I hope you're ready to participate in what should be an interesting program. For the second day in a row now, we're going to be talking about the fallout and the aftermath of the conviction of former Vanderbilt nurse RaDonda Vought. We did a program yesterday on it where we had the prosecuting district attorney on to answer questions. We're going to take phone calls. By the way, we are streaming live on Facebook at newschannel5.com and, of course, also here on the Plus. And so we heard from him, and as we said, we're reaching out. We have reached out to Peter Stryance and RaDonda Vought herself to see and offered them to come on anytime they would like. This week we have not heard back from them. However, we have pulled some audio from RaDonda Vought in the aftermath of the verdict. She spoke, and we're going to play some of that for you. We also reached out to the Tennessee Nurses Association, the American Nurses Association, offering them to come on at any point that they would like to, standing offer for them. At this point, they have declined to send someone, but they did send us a statement, which I'll read to you here in just a moment. They sent a statement, and again, we've reached out. We want to try to cover this and be as fair as possible. If we hear from them, we'll bring them on. We certainly will take phone calls from a lot of people, and I know many of you are those in the healthcare community or nurses, so you'll be welcome to join in the conversation. But we're going to get into the very latest on this from, a lot of different angles, including the fact that right now, as we sit here, change.org has a petition up right now with more than 96,000 signatures where they're seeking to ask for clemency for RaDonda Vought. She hasn't been sentenced yet, but that is something that could be done by the governor. Will he take notice? We'll talk about that and more, but to join us here as well, along with your phone calls and what I said I'll read to you and what you'll hear from RaDonda from the news clips, is News Channel 5's regular guest on this program on the Plus, malpractice attorney Clint Kelly. But this is a story that really falls into your wheelhouse, because I consider you to be something of an expert when it comes to standard of care, hospital policy. That's what you look at, and you followed this case closely. Now, you weren't involved with the case, but you followed it.
Yeah, correct. What's different about this, obviously, it's in the criminal world, not in the world of civil justice where I work. And so the standards are somewhat different, but hopefully what we'll discuss today, I want to delve into Vanderbilt's role in this and what are considered to be system failures that Nurse Vaught attempted to defend the case on. And I think that we can flesh that out some in this program, because it's getting overlooked to some extent from the standpoint that she was the sole defendant in the case and the empty chair was Vanderbilt.
Right.
And I think that's something worth discussing. I was hoping that someone from the nursing department or board of nursing would be here to give us their takes. I'd be really interested to hear what they have to say.
Again, those standing offers are out there, but you're right. Peter Stryance made that point, and I think most people would concede there were some issues with Vanderbilt, but they were not part of this criminal case. And yesterday, the assistant district attorney made it clear that in his mind, this was all on RaDonda Vought.
Right.
It was her. And real quick, let's get into that. And as always, we're going to take phone calls, 737-7587. But just, I said that we would hear from the Tennessee Nurses Association and the American Nurses Association. This can be attributed to them both. They've sent this to us. And, quote, it says, "We are deeply distressed by this verdict and the harmful ramifications of criminalizing the honest reporting of mistakes. Healthcare delivery is highly complex. It is inevitable that mistakes will happen and systems will fail. It is completely unrealistic to think otherwise. The criminalization of medical errors is unnerving, and this verdict sets into motion a dangerous precedent. There are more effective and just mechanisms to examine errors, establish system improvements, and take corrective action. The non-intentional acts of an individual nurses like RaDonda Vought should not be criminalized to ensure patient safety. The nursing profession is already extremely short-staffed, strained, and facing immense pressure, an unfortunate multi-year trend that was further exacerbated by the effects of the pandemic. The ruling will have long-lasting negative impact on the profession. Like many nurses who have been monitoring this case closely, we are hopeful for a different outcome. It's a sad day for all of those who are involved and the families impacted by this tragedy." And Clint, that says it. No one ever said RaDonda Vought intentionally killed this woman. There's no question. This was an accident. This was a mistake. She'd tell you so herself and admit that it was a mistake on her part. But the DA, when I asked that and put it to him, he said, "Nick, what happened here, there weren't just 1, 2, or 3 mistakes. It rose to the level where it was such an egregious case in the prosecution's mind that this was neglect that was criminal. And that was their take. And the jury took 4 hours to convict.
Yeah, one disadvantage that we have, Nick, is we weren't in the trial. We don't know everything that the jury heard, and I have the utmost respect for the jury system, and I think that's something we do need to bear in mind here, is that juries make decisions based on only the evidence they hear, not what we hear outside of the court. But I think a bigger point here is this is why we need a healthy and vibrant civil justice system, to be able to handle cases like this, to make sure patients get fair and full compensation, and so policies will change so we don't use the criminal system to fill in the gap. You know, you hear about patients who have their right to sue abridged or reduced, caps on damages. This causes, in my opinion, spillover into the criminal system, and we don't want that. We don't want any more nurse Vaught's prosecuted. We want the civil justice system to take care of these situations where patients get compensated, hospitals change conduct, and people learn from their mistakes. And there's no question here there were mistakes. I think that what the DA's point out is, I think they enumerate, what, 17
and some
separate
17
deviations
mistakes
from the
that they
care,
perceived that she had made, that it rose to the level of just gross negligence.
Which I think was probably the main factor, in addition to the actual death itself, which was, as we've said before, was horrible. But it's so painful when someone's in healthcare and trying to help people who, as you said, don't want to harm anyone, is standing in front of the badge and having to deal with prosecutions. And of course, something I learned last week I didn't know about was that the Board of Nursing had also taken disciplinary action against Nurse Vaught. So she's faced a double-barrel shotgun to some extent. And
you've said Vandy may be getting a free pass here. And there's no question there were issues with the administering of and delivery of this medicine that required nurses at some point, because the system was down, to bypass things, right?
Correct.
And so, I mean, that was a Vandy administrative type of thing.
Correct. And we talk about that some more in the show.
The AccuDose machine is what it's called.
Right. The vast majority of my cases against hospitals, it's never just one error. It's usually the product of a systemic problem or systemic failure, which is what Nurse Vaught's defense centered around. And unfortunately, she's the only person who can answer for the death here in the criminal system. You can't put Vanderbilt on criminal trial. There's nobody at Vanderbilt from a corporate standpoint to go to jail, so she's the one that's going to bear all the consequences of this. All Vanderbilt can do is write a check, and we'll never know what they did in that regard.
Okay, let's be clear on this. From your perspective, where you would have been involved in this, and I know you don't handle criminal cases, and you were not retained by the family, but I feel quite certain, even though we don't know the details, there had to be a settlement with Vanderbilt. Would you agree?
That would be my assumption. Again, I don't have proof that that happened or what it was, but I would be astounded if there wasn't some kind of settlement made in a case like this.
Okay.
And in a case like this, the problem is, before the caps, you could get damages that the jury saw fit to award. Now there's an arbitrary $750,000 cap on non-economic damages, which was the lion's share of this poor woman's damages. And so the question you have to ask is that justice for suffocating like she did? And that's where I talk about the inadequacy now of the civil justice system to be able to actually give justice. And so now we're going to the criminal system, and it troubles me.
Again, RaDonda Vought was convicted by this jury. It was a 3-day trial, more or less. They deliberated for just 4 hours, which is not a long time to deliberate, and the jury came back guilty criminally negligent homicide and gross neglect of an impaired adult. Okay, that for the 2017 death of patient Charlene Murphy. Now, she has not yet been sentenced. The sentencing comes in May. My understanding, this is a woman, RaDonda Vought, who had no priors. She's a class 1 offender, meaning the least serious of them all. So my guess, and what I've heard from people I've talked to from the criminal side, I don't know if you agree, she faces anywhere at sentencing from the judge who will do it, not the jury, from sentencing from probation to potentially up to 6 years. She's not going to do 6 years in prison, and it'll be at 30%. I think it's very possible that she gets 2 years probation, no jail time.
Well, yeah, that's a distinct possibility. I think, and again, I'm not going to second guess what the district attorney did, because they had 17 counts of deviations from the standard of care, and the relationship between the family and the district attorney and the state, that is their decision to make. But it seems to me, based on the facts of this case, it would be unjust to put this nurse in jail. I guess what I'm saying is she suffered enough, based on what's happened to the Board of Nursing and what's happened in the criminal case. The DA is sending a message that on this particular case, on these particular facts, there needed to be a prosecution and a verdict. And they're not trying to change behavior or worry about nurses not practicing in the profession anymore. They just wanted justice on this particular case. But I don't think justice includes jail time. I just don't think that's right.
And that seems to be much of the sentiment that's out there, which is one reason there's almost 100,000 signatures on the petition to ask for clemency. Do you agree at all with the statement from the nursing associations that this ruling will have a long-lasting impact on the profession? This is a factor. And I ask you, from your perspective as a malpractice attorney, you deal with hospitals and nurses all the time, very closely. So I think that's why you're a good guest for this. Will it have a chilling effect, maybe on those thinking of going into nursing, or those who are in it right now, looking over their shoulder, wondering, if I just make an honest mistake and something bad happens, will I be charged criminally?
I think, Nick, quite the opposite. I think that the reaction to this verdict has been so swift and so strong that I think it's going to chill the interests of another prosecutor in another community to bring a criminal charge like this.
Interesting.
I mean, do you see the blowback?
I absolutely see, and I'm quite sure that the district attorney's office is aware of some of the blowback as a result of this. Don't know what they anticipated or not, but yeah, you may be right. Other DAs are looking at this and saying, I don't want any part of this. Don't want any part of this. Yeah. And maybe not pursue it. But that's for a different reason. They're not wanting any part of it because of the blowback. But what about the idea of, maybe it wasn't right to charge someone in this situation with all these other factors involved? Yeah,
well, the jury said what the jury said, and you have to live with what the jury says insofar as the guilt phase, but the judge has wide discretion here to decide what kind of sentence to impose in this situation and how to handle it. And I suspect, because the judge sees all the evidence, the jury does, that the judge would probably have an opinion, I would think, fairly similar to ours, which is she has been punished to a great extent already. She's never going to practice again. She's paid money, paid fines. Does this seem like a situation where we need to punish some more by putting her in the jail for a crime that she did not intend to commit?
I understand it is a felony, a couple felonies now on her record, but I think after she serves whatever time or does her probation, it's expungable.
Yes, if she completes her probation carefully. If she's a first offender, never had a prior conviction, she's eligible for what we call judicial diversion.
Would you believe her career as a nurse, though, is over?
I would think so.
All right,
I don't think any hospital could hire her again.
Okay. We'll take a break on that note. When we come back, much more to talk about with attorney Clint Kelly. We've got the phone lines open. If you're on hold, stay there, and I'm going to scroll through some of the comments being made right now. A lot of people right now, Clint, watching us as well on Facebook. Questions or comments as we move forward on the RaDonda Vought case. We'll have more of that when we come back right after this. Stay with us.